Oh, darlings, imagine if Jane Austen's drawing rooms were swapped for frozen tents in the Yukon wilds, where the only eligible bachelors were bearded prospectors reeking of desperation and dynamite. These so-called gentlemen of the Klondike gold rush weren't panning for gold alone. No, they dove headfirst into scandals that would make even the most jaded Regency rake blush. Think of it as Bridgerton meets Frostbite, with more venereal surprises than a bad Tinder swipe in 1897. Ah, gentle listeners, or should I say, you scandal-hungry voyeurs of history, gather round as I, your unseen narrator, with a tongue sharper than a miner's pickaxe, unveil the most clandestine carnal capers of the Canadian Klondike gold rush. From 1896 to 1899, that frozen frontier in the Yukon became a veritable Babylon on ice, where gold fever intertwined with a fever of quite another sort. Picture it, tens of thousands of wide-eyed fools stampeding northward, dreaming of nuggets, only to find themselves knee-deep in snow and sin. And who, pray tell, facilitated this descent into debauchery? Why, the ladies of the night, or rather the perpetual twilight of those Arctic summers, who turned the rush into a hush-hush parade of prohibited pleasures. Let us commence with the setting, for no scandal blooms without fertile ground. Dawson City, that ramshackle metropolis sprouting overnight like a mushroom after rain, was the epicenter. By 1898, it boasted a population swelling to 30,000, mostly men with pockets full of dust and heads full of delusions. The streets, mud-choked avenues lined with saloons, gambling dens, and those infamous dance halls that were about as innocent as a fox in a henhouse. Oh, the irony! These establishments promised vaudeville and waltzes, but delivered something far more horizontal. As one contemporary gossip sheet, forgive me, historical account might whisper, in Dawson, the only thing colder than the Klondike River was the NWMP's gaze upon the fallen doves flitting from crib to crib. Now, on to the heroines, or anti-heroines, depending on your moral compass, of our tale, the women who mind the miners, as the wittier pamphlets dub them. Contrary to the sanitized yarns spun by later historians, those prudish scribes who painted the rush as a manly quest for glory, conveniently airbrushing out the bedsheets, over half the women in Dawson dabbled in the sex trade. Some arrived willingly, lured by whispers of fortunes to be made not with pans, but with petticoats. Others, the tragedy beneath the titillation, widows, deserted wives, or those abducted into the life, their stories buried deeper than any placer claim. Take the African-American women like Ruth Brown and Rose Arnold, who boldly set up shop near the barracks in Skagway, catering to the black soldiers of Company L. Their brothel on 6th Avenue was a beacon of enterprise, raking in gold dust until the troops departed in 1902, leaving business as limp as a thawed permafrost. But let us not gloss over the secret practices that would scandalize even the most libertine lord of Regency London. Foremost among them, the dance hall dalliances, a clever ruse where percentage girls twirled with minors for $1 a dance. Think of it as Regency quadrilles, but with the promise of a private encore upstairs. These ladies, bedecked in finery that belied the frost nipping at their hems, earned commissions on drinks sold, then slipped away for more intimate transactions. Modern equivalent? Imagine OnlyFans, but live and in sub-zero temperatures, where a subscription meant a pouch of gold flakes and a risk of syphilis.
Or Belinda Mulrooney, the richest woman in Dawson, who parlayed her savvy into grand hotels, though whispers suggest her path crossed the shadier side before ascending. Even Friedrich Trump, yes, ancestor to a certain modern mogul, ran the Arctic restaurant and hotel, where meals came with a side of merriment, profiting from the rush's randier appetites. Gossip would have it, from brothels to boardrooms, the family trade evolves, but the gleam of gold remains. In this part, we've merely scratched the icy surface, the arrivals, the setups, the initial scandals that set Dawson ablaze with more than just campfires. But oh, the depths yet to plumb, the exotic imports, the violent vendettas, and those truly veiled vices that even the boldest pamphlets dared not print outright. So, as we thaw from this frosty foray into frontier folly, remember, in the Klondike, the real mother lode was mined between the sheets, not the streams. Tune in next for part 2, where we delve into the imported intrigues and murderous mysteries that would make even Lady Whistledown drop her quill in shock. Darlings, if part 1 was the polite invitation to the Klondike scandalous soiree, consider this the moment the champagne overflows and the corsets come undone. We left our frozen libertines teetering on the edge of propriety. Now watch as imported temptations and murderous jealousies turn Dawson into a Regency rake's fever dream, complete with exotic French delights and a pox that would make even Casanova reach for his mercury pills. Welcome back, my deliciously depraved darlings, to the thawing underbelly of the Klondike Gold Rush, where last we lingered on the arrivals of those enterprising doves who turned permafrost into profit. Now let us venture deeper into the imported intrigues, those exotic offerings that had miners queuing like debutantes of Almack's, and the darker shadows where jealousy brewed hotter than rot-gut whiskey. Oh, the irony! These men braved blizzards for gold, only to melt for a glimpse of silk-stockinged sophistication amid the squalor. First, the so-called exotic imports, for what is a frontier scandal without a dash of the foreign to spice the gossip pamphlets? Dawson's demimonde boasted a veritable United Nations of temptation. Japanese women, often Karayuki-san, shipped from the Orient under dubious contracts, brought whispers of Eastern arts that fetched exorbitant pouches of dust. Imagine the pamphlets salivating, such delicate creatures, with techniques veiled in mystery, turning rough prospectors into putty for a premium price. Though records are coy, as befits such secrets, these ladies clustered in discreet establishments, their presence a cultural collision as jarring as a quadrille in an igloo. Modern comparison, think high-end escorts on a crypto-fueled app, but with the added thrill of scurvy and sub-zero trysts. Then came the legendary French houses, those paragons of purported Parisian polish that promised more than mere mechanics. Ah, the allure. No Klondike brothel worth its gold scale dared omit a French room or madam, where services were advertised with winks and Gallic flair. As one ironic diarist might quip, or perhaps did in a ledger later burned, for an extra nugget one could indulge in practices so refined they'd scandalize the Moulin Rouge. Oral favors, role play a la Versailles, whatever the miner's isolation-fueled fantasies demanded, cloaked in the euphemism of French lessons. Yet the delicious hypocrisy. Many French madams hailed from Chicago or Denver, their accents as authentic as fool's gold. Still, the labels sold, turning ordinary encounters into exotic escapades, much like today's VIP experiences on dubious websites.
Not to be outshone were the dance hall divas, those percentage girls who elevated vice to vaudeville. Klondike Kate Rockwell, the flame-haired siren with legs that launched 1,000 pokes, performed her flame dance in a scarlet gown that left little to the imagination. Think Bridgerton's Daphne, but with actual fire and fewer inhibitions. Or diamond-toothed Gertie Lovejoy, flashing her gem-encrusted grin while fleecing fools at Faro. These women weren't mere prostitutes, they were celebrities, commanding stages in palaces like the Orpheum, where a dance cost $1 and upstairs negotiations sealed with champagne. Irony abounds. While respectable wives back east clutched pearls, these fallen stars out-earned bankers, proving the real rush was for female charisma in a sea of bearded boredom. But lest we romanticize too rosily, Regency scandals had duels. Klondike had downright depravity laced with danger. Violence shadowed the trade like avalanche clouds. Jealousy raged fiercer than claim disputes. With women scarce, 1 to every 20 men at peak, miners possessive turned feral. Prostitutes faced assaults from clients who viewed them as property. beatings over favorites, stabbings in drunken rages. In Skagway's lawless prelude, poor Ella Wilson met a gruesome end. Bound, gagged, suffocated in her crib, her hard-earned $2,000 vanished. Accusations flew towards Soapy Smith, that charming cad of conmen, but justice as elusive as virgin claims by '98. Dawson fared marginally better under the Mounties' scarlet gaze, yet horrors persisted. Gang rapes dismissed as roughhousing, women hurled onto stoves, pamphlets would gasp in feigned shock while devouring details. Many doves arrived coerced, trafficked by pimps, or stranded by misfortune, their choices as free as a staked creek. And the ultimate irony? These miners, preaching civilization, unleashed barbarity on the women sustaining their sanity. Then the silent killer, the venial scourge that turned gold fever into genuine fever. Syphilis and gonorrhea ravaged the rush like biblical plagues, spread in those unsanitary cribs with nary a thought to prophylaxis. Condoms existed, but who pauses mid-mania? Epidemics of typhoid and meningitis compounded the misery, but the pox was personal, disfiguring sores, madness, death. Miners imported it from home ports. Doves bore the brunt, passing it back in a vicious cycle. Modern parallel? An unchecked STI app hookup spree, but without antibiotics. Mercury cures that poisoned as much as healed. One can't help but smirking at the hypocrisy. Men chasing purity in streams while wallowing in impurity between sheets. Amid this chaos shone entrepreneurial queens like Belinda Mulrooney, not a prostitute, but a savvy siren who parlayed trade into empire. From selling silk undies to building the Grand Fairview Hotel, she out-hustled the hustlers, becoming Dawson's richest woman. Or Diamond Lil Davenport, Madame Extraordinaire in Skagway, whose brothel rivaled palaces. These women flipped the script, mining men with business acumen sharper than any pick. Yet as '99 dawned, the rush waned. Nome beckoned, claims petered. Many doves drifted south, fortunes squandered on drink or bad bets. Dawson's fire of '99 banished the trade to Loustown across the river, a final prudish purge. The exotic allure faded, leaving ghosts in abandoned cribs.
We've plumbed the imports, the violences, the veiled vices, but oh, the tales yet untold, the queer undercurrents in all-male camps, the indigenous women's overlooked tragedies, and those final, fatal follies. Thus ends our dip into Dawson's deeper debaucheries, where French lessons came dearer than gold, and the only sure strike was a dose of regret. Next, in Part 3, we unearth the forbidden fringes and fading fortunes that would leave even the bawdiest pamphlet blushing. Stay scandalized, darlings. Oh, my scandalous sweets, if the Klondike's earlier revels were a flirtatious waltz, this finale is the unmasked orgy at dawn, where forbidden fringes unfurl amid all-male camps, overlooked indigenous tragedies, and the pox-riddled sunset of a gilded era. Think Regency hypocrisy thawed into Arctic desperation, with vices so veiled even the pamphlets averted their gaze. Return with me, you insatiable gossips, to the waning whispers of the Klondike Gold Rush, where we've danced through imported temptations and violent vendettas, leaving only the most forbidden fringes and fading fortunes to titillate. Ah, the irony. In a land stampeded by men chasing golden purity, the purest scandals lurked in the shadows of isolation, among the overlooked, and in the inexorable decline that turned Babylon on ice back to barren tundra. Let us first peer into the queer undercurrents of those all-male camps, a topic so taboo that even the bawdiest pamphlets dared only euphemistic hints. With ratios as lopsided as 20 men to 1 woman, the frozen frontiers echoed the California rush's hidden histories, where situational intimacies flourished unchecked. Though Klondike records are coy, prudery preserving propriety, one supposes, parallels abound. Miners huddled in remote cabins, starved not just for gold, but for touch, engaging in what Regency rakes might term Greek vices, or modern minds recognize as fluid frontier sexuality.
Historical whispers from similar rushes suggest same-sex relations, consensual or coerced, provided solace amid the squalor, with no concepts yet of rigid homosexuality to condemn them. Imagine the irony. These rugged individualists preaching manly virtue, finding warmth in ways that would scandalize Victorian salons. Yet, as in Seattle's gateway ports during the rush, authorities turned blind eyes to male-male encounters, prioritizing order over morality. Modern scholars note Gold Rush counties today boast higher LGBT populations and tolerant attitudes, a legacy of those unfettered fringes, perhaps. But darker still were the tragedies befalling indigenous women, those silent sufferers airbrushed from triumphant tales. The Han and Tagish peoples, displaced by the horde, faced exploitation laced with cultural devastation. While few Han women entered formal prostitution, social divides as rigid as frozen rivers, many endured coercion, alcohol-fueled assaults, and unequal exchanges born of desperation. Diseases decimated communities already reeling from relocation to reserves. Venereal scourges imported by stampeders ravaged without mercy. Alcohol, wielded as a tool of trade and temptation, facilitated abuses that pamphlets ignored in favor of white doves dramas. Irony drips like thawing ice. The civilizers brought not enlightenment, but epidemics, starvation, and violation, punishing indigenous women for the sins of the rush itself. Respectable white women shunned association, clutching pearls, while the true victims bore the brunt, much like Regency society's disdain for the fallen, amplified by racial chasms.
And speaking of the pox, the venereal vengeance that turned feverish dreams to nightmares, syphilis and gonorrhea rampaged through Dawson like avalanches, unchecked in unsanitary cribs and hasty trysts. Condoms existed, sheepskin sheaths, darlings, as old as Casanova, but who paused in gold dust delirium? Sex workers at the epicenter suffered most, disfiguring sores, infertility, madness, death. Mercury treatments poisoned as they purported to heal, a cruel modern parallel to feudal chemo without cure. Miners imported infections from ports, doves disseminated them in cycles of survival. The hypocrisy. Men chased stream purity while plunging into impurity, blaming the women who mined their misfortunes. Epidemics compounded scurvy and typhoid, turning the rush into a graveyard gamble. As 1899 dawned, the gilded bubble burst. Nome's beaches beckoned with fresh promises, draining Dawson like a punctured poke. Thousands fled southward, fortunes frittered on faro or fizzled claims. The Great Fire of April '99 scorched the core, prompting Mounties to banish vice to swampy fringes, then across the river to infamous Lousetown, a prudish purge disguised as progress. Dance halls dimmed. Percentage curls, those commission-earning twirlers, saw crowds thin as claims petered. By 1901, gambling shuddered under Ottawa's edict. Last halls closed in 1908. Queens like Klondike Kate drifted to vaudeville circuits, their flame dances flickering out. Madams and miners alike squandered spoils, leaving ghosts in abandoned cribs. Irony supreme, the rush for eternal wealth ended in ephemerality, Dawson shrinking from 30,000 souls to a spectral shadow. Yet some fortunes endured, Belinda Mulrooney's empire, or those who invested wisely. But for most doves, faded glamour, regretted doses, violent ends unsolved. The forbidden fringes, queer comforts, indigenous agonies, pox-plagued passions remained buried deeper than depleted creeks, sanitized in later lore. Thus concludes our frolic through the Klondike's carnal capers, a frontier where gold gleamed brightest between thighs, not streams, and secrets thawed only to refreeze in regret. So, as Dawson's debaucheries dissolve into dutiful history, remember, the Klondike's true legacy wasn't nuggets, but the nuggets of naughtiness we dared unearth. If this series left you flushed with frostbite and fascination, like and share. Perhaps we'll prospect another scandal soon. Ta-ta, darlings.
And oh, the irony of it all. These women often out-earned the prospectors themselves, turning the tables on the patriarchal gold game.
As one ironic observer noted in an 1898 diary, or so we imagine, for such pamphlets were burned faster than a miner's candle, the true rush was not for ore, but for ardor. The ladies panned the men's pockets with a flutter and a sigh. Deeper into the shadows lurked the cribs, those tiny one-room shanties where the real commerce occurred. Clustered in alleys dubbed Paradise Alley, or later banished to Lousetown across the river after a devastating fire, these were no boudoirs of luxury. Picture a Regency scandal sheet gasping, "Such hovels, barely wider than a lady's corset," furnished with naught but a cot, a stove, and a basin for ablutions, yet commanding fees that would make a duke's mistress envious. Here, practices whispered in hushed tones included everything from straightforward liaisons to more exotic requests born of isolation and intoxication. Miners, starved for female company after months in the bush, sought not just release, but role-play fantasies, perhaps pretending their paramour was a long-lost sweetheart from back east, or enacting scenes from dime novels. And let us not forget the multicultural melange. Japanese prostitutes, documented in historical ledgers, brought Eastern arts to the Arctic, their secret techniques, as gossips might euphemize, fetching premium prices amid the cultural clash. Yet, for all the wit we can muster, the reality was laced with peril, a far cry from the drawing-room intrigues of Austin. Prostitution was the most dangerous profession in Skagway, riddled with violence that would curdle even the sourest scandal broth. Witness poor Ella D. Wilson, the African-American working girl found murdered in her bed in May 1898, pillowcase over her head, gag in her mouth, wrists and ankles bound, her savings of $2,000, a king's ransom, equivalent to over $60,000 today, vanished into the ether. Fingers pointed at the notorious conman Soapy Smith, that Regency-esque rogue who ruled Skagway's underworld, but the crime went unsolved, her grave a silent sentinel in the Gold Rush Cemetery. Or consider the young prostitute in Circle City, gang-raped by 6 brutes, then hurled onto a red-hot stove, her screams echoing unheeded as a miners' meeting dismissed it as mere roughhouse. Irony abounds. These men who braved avalanches and starvation for gold unleashed avalanches of brutality on the very women who sustained their spirits. And who enforced order in this frozen Sodom? The Northwest Mounted Police, those scarlet-coated guardians, attempted to regulate the revelry with all the efficacy of a chaperone at a midnight ball. By 1898, arrests for prostitution spiked, with over half the serious offenses that year tied to the trade, though many were mere slaps on the wrist, like quarterly fines of $25, a pittance for the prosperous. Sex workers were herded into designated zones, their operations disguised as cigar stores or laundries to evade the prudes. One can't help but chuckle at the hypocrisy. The Mounties turned a blind eye when it suited, for as pamphlets might snicker, a town without vice is a mine without gold, barren and boring. Modern parallel, think Vegas regulations meets Victorian prudery, where sin is taxed but never truly tamed. Lest we forget the entrepreneurial spirits amid the squalor, figures like Diamond Lil Davenport, that vaudeville vixen who opened Skagway's finest brothel, embodied the wit and resilience. Described as possessing perfect beauty and refinement, she lured clients with charm sharper than a stiletto heel.